Sounds great. It's not very loud. Tell him. Tell Sam that. Hello. Hello. Hello, folks. Coming in. Is that all we need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everything sounds great. Do I sound like a bona fide podcast host? That's all that matters. Yeah, you guys say something into your mics there.
Hello.
There you go,
Does it sound good?
Testing. Hello, testing. Should we be even louder? Is this
Hello?
good? Oh, great. Oh, great. Oh, sorry, keep talking. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So excited to have this conversation.
In this room. I'm Scott Walters, rector here at Calvary, and these Wednesday night conversations have been a lot of fun. This one's going to be a little different, and I'm excited to have it. We're just so you know, the way this runs is that the plan is we'll talk for about 45 minutes or so, if I can shut it down. Sometimes it's too. I'm not good at that, but anyway, we'll start at about 7 o'clock. There will be time for questions. So save up your questions and thoughts and curiosities, and we'll make sure you've got time to ask these smart folks what you're wondering about. Go ahead and turn off your phones. We are recording this it's a live stream, and then it will also be dropped as a podcast in Calvary's different platforms, which we love that these things can live on. But do know that we shut that down at 7, so whatever you ask is not preserved for posterity forever. You can ask whatever you want. It's just been prudent, we figured, to let people not have to ask their questions on the live stream and whatnot. So, but whatever y'all say up to that point will be preserved forever in the internet. So there it is. Are we ready to start, Robin? We're rolling? All right. So, and along the way, just be yourselves. You can laugh, you can cry, you can do whatever the things are that you want to do. You're part of this. This is Dialogue, a podcast of Calvary Episcopal Church's 102-year-old Lenten preaching series recorded live in downtown Memphis. I'm Scott Walters, rector of Calvary Church, and tonight we're in conversation with three remarkable people: Jason Turner of Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, Stuart Harris of Constellation Properties, and Margaret Haltom, who's a PhD candidate in urban planning at MIT. And our theme tonight, typically our Wednesday nights, we take our preacher from Wednesday at noon or the next day, and we bring the preacher over to have a longer conversation with them. And we knew this was an open week, and so last fall, as we were brainstorming, we had this open vessel because, I should say one more thing. Padre Gotuma will be with us tomorrow night. He couldn't get here in time for Wednesday night, so we had this vessel. And the idea came up to do something in honor of Tommy Pacello. He's somebody who meant a lot to me and to this church and to this community. And there are a lot of interesting people in and around Memphis who are doing the kind of work that Tommy challenged us all to do. If you didn't know him, he was the founder and director of the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. But his work was not limited to the medical district. There were places that, Tommy and Olivia lived over here in a firehouse that they started bringing up a whole neighborhood together. He was just an effusive, remarkable person that I'm missing pretty badly right now. The reason I'm missing him really is because it seems like everybody I hear who's ready to make the world better is really grim about it right now. And there was nothing grim about Tommy Pacello. Nobody ever called him grim. He always thought something else could happen wherever we were and whatever the situation was. So I want to summon his spirit in any way we can and through these folks tonight. So welcome. I'm really glad to have all three. I wanted to say, too, that Todd Richardson was planning to be here and had a conflict and wasn't able to. But the Lord provides, because Margaret was in town from Berkeley and was ready to stop in. You'll understand in a minute why she's a great person to bring in these conversations as well. So that's all the intro. I want to just kick this off upstream a little bit by asking a really basic question. So all three of you from very different places, very different perspectives, care about the built environment. I had a conversation with Jason a few years ago when I realized that Mississippi Boulevard was thinking really creatively about their spaces and how they interacted with the neighborhood and whatnot. Stuart's working on the Sterrick building, an important building downtown to bring to life if we're going to knit back together this downtown that we love and want to thrive. I first got interested in Stuart because I heard him on a podcast, and then hear this developer talking to Eric Barnes and using words like human flourishing. A developer, like really thinking that what our work in the world could help people make better relationships with one another. Margaret has been deeply involved since her graduate work at Harvard and now at MIT on bringing to life spaces that have a dark and difficult history and making them truthful spaces. And so here at Calvary, the 87 Adams slave market site was active on our block in the 1850s, and Margaret has just been an absolutely essential role, played an essential role in finding us resources and connecting us to this, how to tell that story in an enduring way. So different approaches, but they all have something to do with the built environment, as we say, or spaces. I'd love you to start by just talking about a place, maybe, where you have felt alive, a place that you felt like something around you brought something forth in you. I won't put too fine a point in it. If you want to tie it to why you do what you do, you can, but I thought we'd just start there. Anything come to mind? No order.
So I first of all, I got interested in real estate when I was 9. My dad was a developer. He developed suburban office buildings. So like he developed the International Paper buildings here at Poplar and Massey, and the company he worked with bought the Crescent Center and some of those. So when I was a kid, I had a hard hat of my own and loved buildings and seeing things be created. But I didn't really start to appreciate them until I started working downtown. My first job out of college was at First Horizon. I had no business being in banking. We had no computer. I had to do intermediate accounting with pencils and paper, and that didn't last long. But what I loved about being in downtown Memphis was what our friend Todd Richardson calls social friction. So we'd leave for lunch, we'd go out of the building, and we'd always run into people on Main Street. We'd go to the Little Tea Shop or any number of places down, Elliot's Burgers, or this is 25 years ago, and always run into someone we knew. We'd see someone from Civic Hall, and just I just was so excited to my first job out of college to be in people were always dogging Memphis, and I was like, Main Street, anything off Main Street seems really fun and alive, and I'd love to see it that vibrant again, but I felt alive down here, actually. So.
I can't think of one space or place, but I would say it's whenever I can find myself at the intersection of opportunity and possibility. My father was a pastor for 40 years and was a visionary. I can remember stepping into his study and there would be blueprints of what he wanted to do on the property of the church for the community. He led the denominational body locally, and they had plans. I'm from Nashville, so they had plans at the time.
We've heard of it.
Yeah, to create senior housing, seeing the rise and the need, and so coming to Memphis, in the specific neighborhood where our Midtown campus is located in the medical district in Madison Heights, I feel alive because it represents possibility and opportunity, and that's what wakes me up each morning, and what I go to bed with each night.
For me, I've always felt naturally alive in like urban green spaces, which I think is, nowadays, this time of year, you go to Overton Park and it's all in bloom and beautiful, and I saw a man walking his herd of goats the other day, and I saw yesterday someone had these remote control boats that he was zipping around there's just a reclamation of public space that I find really beautiful. And your story, Stuart, reminded me of my first job ever was tending the 50-foot-long bison manure pile at Shelby Farms, and I had a big temperature stick, and the idea was you had to take the temperature of the compost because compost heats up and gets warm, and we had to regularly turn the pile. Anyway.
I like my first job better.
It's alive. Yeah, it's alive.
Truly. But through that process, I began to love being in gardens and green spaces, and I worked with students at White Station, where I went to high school, to start this garden behind our school. And Don LaFawn is here, who's a Latin teacher at White Station for many years. And we turned this vacant, abandoned space behind the cafeteria into a garden. And I learned through that process that I'm a terrible gardener. Everything I grow dies, truly. My mom can attest to what my plants look like. But what I loved the most was seeing all of these people come around a space and take ownership of a space. And we would have the prom queen weeding next to the football players who carried water, seeing how people could dream about what a place that had been abandoned for a long time could become. And that's really what pointed me to the whole world of urban planning, because it's not just, keeping an orchard alive or thinking about a garden bed, but it's like who actually inhabits and takes ownership and finds connections in a place.
Oh, that's fabulous. All three of those are fabulous to think about. And I love how vibrant, how full of people and intersections and nature and some things that we keep separate. We titled this Seeking the Welfare of the City. It comes from a section in Jeremiah that I really love, where these people have been off in exile, and the prophet says, seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile, for in its well-being you'll find your own well-being. This is very communal vision of human flourishing. It's the city. Sometimes we think, we need to get away from all these humans and out into the wild where I can be alone with the divine and you won't be in my way. Then we'll be fine. But it's not really the vision in a lot of religious traditions. It's actually a flourishing human city. So building on this, I'd love to hear you each talk kind of about what are some of the values, core values or goals or ways that you start to think, you're here because I know you think deeply and ethically about what we build and how we inhabit our spaces. How would you start to talk about what drives you, what centers you, what refocuses you when you're thinking about the built environment in these ways? I'm gonna have to call on them. No.
I'll jump in, since we started this conversation years ago about our current work. As a primarily African-American congregation, I think one of the things that has driven us in this quest to develop our 23 acres in Midtown has been self-determination. During this time where many congregations are closing, merging, fleeing, or just selling their property to a developer to take and do whatever with, and taking a large sum of money and relocating, it's been our self-determination to say, we want to bring life to this community. We want to rebuild it. We want to see this as an area that has a sense of place, and to do so in a way where we don't displace persons, but also where we don't lose sight of our mission, to care about the things that Jesus Christ was cared about, the communities and populations. And so currently, we deal with the reality that first, in many ways, there are not lots of residents in Madison Heights, but those who frequent that community are the unhoused community. So how do you bring about new life, new community in a way that you don't begin to discard? And I use that very, not displace. We don't want people to be unhoused as a permanent way of living, but discard them. Because many times when new developments come up in cities across the country, the question is, how do we get rid of those who are unsavory? So living in that tension of, yes, wanting to do something new, something that will connect the city, that will create a sense of place for all people, but also recognizing that there are people currently there who are unhoused and not wanting to feel as if building this community creates a situation in which we discard them.
That's fabulous and really important to go. Typically, development left to its own devices seems like it sends us further apart. And all of these images of human flourishing, actually all the images you all had of cities are these unlikely people meeting people. And so that's a powerful taste thing. What about y'all? Thoughts about core values and basic?
Well, I think a lot, like my basic question is really who is a space for? And to exactly what you were just saying, Scott, so much of a city is privately owned. Like when you walk around Memphis, it's not a, it's do you have the money to go in certain stores? What can you access? And in urban planning theory, not to get too in the weeds of that, but there has long been a movement of what's called a right to the city, that we need to reclaim privately owned spaces and make people feel at home there and like they belong there, and like the city is not just owned by the developers or the homeowner associations who control a neighborhood, or the people who, have their own barriers over the neighborhood. But how do you actually do that in practice? And I think that's why churches, community centers, parks, memorials are all places that are trying to invite the world in and trying to say, how do we collectively reclaim this place? And to me, I'm so struck that so many community development corporations in the South started out as churches, have their roots in trying to develop a community at the same time, because there was this inherent mandate of we're not only, both sides of a mandate. We're not just a church trying to have people ascribe to certain beliefs, but we're also doing what we preach and practicing and trying to help people access resources they need, trying to invite people in to material needs. But by the same token, on the side of community development and urban planning, our goal is not just to reinvest a place, but actually care for the needs of the people and heal people who go there. And if you think about memorials, for example, or how different spaces get designed, anyone could put a memorial in their front yard and say whatever they want to themselves. But if you are designing a space where the whole goal of it is who comes here, who takes ownership of that, then that changes how you do the design process in itself. Like who feels heard in the process, who heals in the process, what kind of questions get asked that would never get asked without this space. So to me, it's really all about how people find that ownership of a space and that sense of being able to see themselves in its future.
Fascinating, yeah. How does the space tell me I'm welcome here?
Right.
Physically, or how legally am I welcome here? Or so many ways we can put up barriers or make invitations with the way that's. What about you, Stuart?
So we kind of loosely follow a model that came out of the University of Virginia. Some sociologists created this model called the human ecology model, and they look and they say, what are the endowments that a culture needs to thrive? And so they would say it's the good, the true, the beautiful, the just, the sustainable, and the prosperous. And that encompasses everything from a fair and just legal system to healthy churches, to art, music, beauty, green space, healthcare access, all that. And they would say that, and we agree, that a city is a great way to measure those things. If you want to say we want culture to thrive, that's really broad. But doing that at the city level, you can see what works and doesn't work. Well, we're trying to drill down, and what we have asked of them is, is this possible at a neighborhood level, in a district of sorts? Can you do the same thing? And I think what's cool about the built environment is that there's ways that we can all tangibly experience those endowments in people each doing their work in those areas, and then we're able to really see flourishing by seeing these things tangibly. Yeah.
And that's also an ecological or a organic model of neighbor. It sounds like what you're saying. We mix these components in some kind of flourishing. It's a little trickier than just a linear.
It is not black and white. It's very gray.
Yeah,
and it gives us something. That's why I said we loosely hold on to it.
Yeah, because there's one narrative about development in the 20th century was it really got very modern in that we know all the variables, we can do it, and then you've got Robert Moses bringing a freeway through here, or a freeway is going to come through Memphis because the main thing needs to happen is cars got to get where they're going. But it can really destroy an ecosystem that's much harder to bring back to life when you have to attend to all those and try to figure out what this particular neighborhood. I mean, how do you start that work? Like in any of yours, how do you start the work of saying, okay, this is a place, this is a neighborhood, this is a block, this is a park that has died or withered or is not at its health, it's not flourishing. How do you begin the process of saying, I wonder how we learn this place? This has it started with y'all within particular ways and in projects you know?
I mean, ideally, you start with at least some anchor institutions that are rooted, and you're not on a complete island. Whether that be a church or a school or, community center.
I totally agree. Of course, coming from a congregational perspective, definitely there was a group of church leaders or the persons we felt had certain expertise in that field that we had multiple conversations with, but it was also the engagement with community stakeholders, that listening and hearing what they felt would benefit the community rather than us coming in and saying, well, this is what we're going to do. That listening both internally and externally, I think, is where the spark came from for what we're working towards.
And I think to that point of listening, when I listen to what people want in the future of a place, I'm always so struck by the past, like how vivid the past is to people. It's kind of a core tenet of community development work and planning is like, you think of the future of a place and people get very anxious that their stories, their histories are going to be overwritten in the future. So as a planner, I'm most interested when I think about the future in the past in a strange way, because a lot of urban planning for so long didn't do that. Like when you mentioned Robert Moses, freeway development, so much of that was the stories of this place don't matter in pursuit of the future. You know, the memories of this place don't matter. Eminent domain, knock this place down. I mean, so much of Memphis today, you see a lot of vacancy that was demolished when it didn't all have to be. And I think if you instead start with the memories of the people who live there actually matter, it changes that development to what you were saying, Jason, about developing without displacement. How do you even know what you're displacing if you're not caring about the stories of the people who live there and the memories of the people who live there? And so for me, a lot of my work is with community development corporations in Memphis, particularly with the Works CDC and with Klondike Smoky City Community Development Corporation in Klondike. And in all of this neighborhood redevelopment work about North Side Square and the future of the neighborhood, again and again, people have said there is a past here that has to be honored and embodied in the future of the place. And I think that changes not just how you design and who a place is for, but physically what a place feels like. Like if you think of going to a place that didn't have, like Mud Island, for example. If you go to a place that didn't necessarily have a past that you can feel there, like you do feel differently when you walk around and you feel like it's all new and kind of overwritten because it was literally a vacant, piece of mud in the river. So how do you, if you're bringing a place to life, like you said, Scott, what a part of this is bringing it to life. How do you find out what it was and have that past actually be a part of it and something you can feel in it? Like that's so much more real, not just the people who live there, but to anybody who goes to a place and feels what its spirit has been about.
There's got to be a tension too, because isn't, I would guess NIMBYism is a little bit of a too firm attention.
Yes.
This is what it was. I like it the way it was. How do you navigate, whether it's a church or whether it's the Stuart building? Actually, do I remember right that your like groom's cake or something was in the Stuart building? Like this guy's been into the Stuart building for a long time.
Most people, guys, when they get married, their wedding cake, their groom's cake is their alma mater, or football or something. Well, my wife was like, what is Stuart like? He doesn't care about sports. He likes Memphis. He likes old buildings. He likes architecture. So I'm going to make the Stuart building his cake. And that was 19 years ago. We had no idea that we would
There it is. But
be a part of it.
The point being that how do we attend to the past, honor the past, without having nostalgia keep us gripped in that? How does that play out in how y'all think about this work? Because we're just a church. If we renovate the church, nobody cares. We can just put anything wherever we want, and everybody just Jesus people in there.
Yeah,
Move the pews.
but you've been here for a while, so like our current building is the former Blvd Baptist, right? We also own the former Temple Israel and the school, and which also was a site at one time of Mid-America Seminary, right? All these spaces we currently own. So there are histories that are attached in some ways, but we've lived there long enough that we have our own histories that are emerging. And I guess the story, so those spaces have stories, but for us as a congregation, we have almost a nomadic story where we started on Mississippi Boulevard, and then we went to Whitehaven. And then when Bellevue went to Cordova, we came to Midtown. And then even going to Midtown, we have a campus on East Shelby Drive now, right? So there's been...
Never changed your name.
Never changed the name, right? Always Mississippi Boulevard, wherever we are. So it's never forgetting those stories, right? But it's also not being beholden and realizing you have the power to extend the story in a new way. So I think one of the ways I feel we have honored what these legacy communities of faith have meant is to say we're not moving, we're staying right here because we feel what this community will need is a worshiping community, right? That's committed to the welfare of the people who live here. And so I think there are various ways in which you honor the stories that have emerged over time.
It's an interesting time you asked this. We've been going through the branding exercise on the Steric, and one of our taglines is 29 floors, countless stories, because we've over 100 years almost 100 years collected all kinds of stories from people in there, and over almost 30 stories in the floors in the building had tons of tenants over 60 years. And we've been able to collect a lot of that, and some of it is shameful. I mean, you look at we found vestiges of segregated bathrooms. A lot of the floors have bathrooms on the stairwell that clearly were not, were segregated. So things like that are reminders, stark reminders of a bad past, and then the opulence that you walked out of the segregated bathroom has an old utility sink and a bunch of electrical panels in it with a toilet, and the other one is full of marble and opulent stuff. There's also a lot of fun in looking back over these stories, cobbling them together, trying to piece it together, thinking about what the designers were thinking at the time they made it. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? What did they intend for the space? How can we honor the good parts of that and work to dignify people through the new design? So.
Yeah, I think a lot about this era of heightened resistance we're in to change in any form, but to the NIMBY revolts of like this place has to stay the same. And I think that question, Scott, is like exactly what you need to learn how to mediate. Like what Jason was saying, how do you show that you care about the stories of a place and honoring them, that alone can mean something to people who have never heard that before. But it's interesting to me that so much of the NIMBY, maybe not everybody might know that, not in my backyard, this idea of not wanting to see a development change like the neighborhood you live in. So you see it, a lot of times you see it in the response to Memphis 3.0, because there's this vision that there will be upzoning so people can develop at higher density levels, have, you know, more taller buildings, just to put it in plain speak. And some people see that and then get worried because they think my neighborhood's going to change. What I know and love about a place is not going to be here. But I think understanding the root of some of those tensions is really important. Like some of the root of that is inherently more exclusionary, saying like, I don't want outsiders in my neighborhood. Like where does that come from? Is that root being worried about, is that a legacy of racialized exclusion? Like who do you not want in your neighborhood? Or discrimination towards tenants? I hear a lot of people say like, well, they might put renters in my neighborhood, and so who could come in? But sometimes the root of that fear of a future is a different kind of fear, like a fear that the change you have seen was because of freeway construction that displaced your neighbors. Or I heard fierce resident resistance to pulling up some old cable lines, you know, like the trolley lines that extended towards the middle of the city in a neighborhood where the trolleys never actually ran once. But people, when they heard the street lines, like the inoperable street lines, were going to get pulled up, there was this enormous resistance to that, because behind that is kind of this unfulfilled promise, like the city was going to reach us and never did. Wow. And so when you pull those up, it's like that legacy is totally unfulfilled, and then there's a whole broken promise associated with it. So if we can understand like what's behind some of these fears, do some of them need to be assuaged or more seriously repaired? Do some of them need to be having hard conversations about who are you afraid will come into the neighborhood? Or do some of them need to be, well, legitimately, let's help you stay in the neighborhood when people come in because you're worried that you won't have a place, your property taxes will go up and you won't have a place here. So, you know, how do we understand what's behind the fear, and then can we begin to rebuild the trust once we get what it's rooted in?
That's so helpful and interesting, because sometimes I don't know what I'm afraid of, right? It takes a minute. I'm uncomfortable here. I'm not sure what so it may take some conversation and reflection and trust before I even realize why I'm upset. There's y'all are all reminding me, as you're talking about stories unfolding in a place and change. I mean, if they are stories, they are changing. There's this book I love called How Buildings Learn by Stuart Brand, who was he was crazy. He was a wild guy. He was a Whole Earth Catalog guy for you in the 70s, you know, but he did everything. But he talked about this, the best buildings don't stay put, and if we build a building just thinking we know what it will be forever, it won't. But the best buildings actually have this capacity to shift and change, continuing with the story, like some through line that says we haven't erased this history, but we know that for history to stop means we've died. So it's interesting that all of your descriptions, there's a certain dynamic kind of. It's not a bad thing to love your place for what it is, and worry that something might be lost or that damage might be made, but that process of telling stories and building trust seems like hard, tricky work. We would like there to be a quick fix that we could just allot the funds and do the program, but all of this seems like it involves relationships, trust. I mean, interesting. I get there's no question there. I'm just saying that's another question though I did have. If I think about a world that does get broken down, I do think we have a problem with trust in this world. And some days I wake up and read the papers and say, have we just been trying to see if we could build a whole world where nobody had to trust anybody, which is basically war? Well, even war you have to trust your own. So I feel like we're at a trust deficit, and yet as I hear you talk, we've got to break through and find new ways. One of the things I think of when I think of, back to Tommy, is this playfulness. Today, Micah Greenstein talked about joy, even coming out of people who've endured really hard difficulties, yet being this reservoir of joy and playfulness. I just want to drop that into the conversations. If we're thinking about how places come to life, do you have any? Playfulness is my word. You may have another avenue of how we break out of this kind of stuckness where we're trying to let this story of a place unfold and flourish and grow and become what it needs to be. Is there a place for playfulness, lightness, joy? Fill in the blanks as to how we might help this process happen.
I can start because I love this question, and playfulness is a big thing that comes to my mind when you ask people about the future of a place. Often when you ask people, what should be here? What do you want your neighborhood to look like? People say, I don't know. I have no idea. Which makes sense. Like if you think about what a vacant lot near you looks like, what should it be? Maybe you might come up with a coffee shop or something you want to go to, but people don't often have like a vision for what something should become. If Todd Richardson was sitting here, he clearly has visions for how to inhabit places. But a lot of people, there needs to be like a playfulness spark of the imagination to think of what something could be. And I hear this also with memory-based planning. In this project we've been doing for the North Side redevelopment and a lot of the redevelopment of Klondike, asking people, what memories do you want remembered? And I've had someone look at me and say, like, I don't have any memories. And I think if you think of more whimsical, temporary kind of interventions, they get people, they like unlock an interest in thinking about the future of a place, because people can actually see a place getting inhabited as something, and suddenly they're thinking of new ideas. So, for example, in Klondike, we've turned a vacant, abandoned daycare into a temporary museum about the history of the neighborhood. It's on the corner of Jackson and Watkins. And people, it involved a lot of playfulness, like there were these kind of creepy Big Bird portraits along the walls, and we had to paint over them and turn it into this temporary exhibit space where people can come in and they can bring their family archives and they can unearth the record of the neighborhood together, and then they can also contribute to what they want to see in the future of the place. But it wasn't really until reinvigorating a place that people could then come in and say, oh, I can see for myself what this place could become, or I can see for myself that these people care about honoring my family's stories. Like some of the actual playful interventions just help bring to mind all these things a place could be. One of my first planning projects was in a low-income housing development that was home to over 300 kids, and the property management group wanted to, or the owners of the Section 8 development wanted to have kids drive the future design of the housing. And a big way that we got middle schoolers and high schoolers to envision it was actually creating these temporary play spaces based on what the kids wanted in the future of the green spaces of the neighborhood to be. And because they could then go out and inhabit and like see a place coming to life, then they had all these ideas about, oh, do I want carpets or hardwood? Like suddenly small details, but also big picture, how should we reorient the structures of the building can come to mind when you just see these small places get invigorated.
That's so great, because then you're not asking to decide forever. We're going to play for a minute and learn from that. I love that. Thoughts, y'all?
Mine's not as deep, but we we had some folks break into the Stuart building. The Stuart's not the only thing we're working on. It's a much broader play. I just keep bringing it up. We had some people breaking in and taking photographs, and one person parachuted off of the top of the building and videoed it and put it on Instagram. Thankfully not in our ownership, but before. It is out there, and it has been put on like Channel 5. You can go find it. What we did, instead of having them continue to break in, we invited them in. We had a day where we had 50 people. And I just said, all I need is you to sign this liability waiver because there are a million ways to die in this building. And we just let them play. For all day, they went all through the building, and they all shared their photography with us and said, you can use it in anything. And so we've got this just great collection of incredible, all 40 or 50 of those people had their own, the lens in which they were viewing that experience. And they all shared it with us. We put it in a big combined album. And so I have learned more about the property because people have found things that I couldn't see. And it was just really fun. And we let them, if you've ever seen the stickers that say, live a good story around town, that's this Grind City Meet. These stickers are all over that building. We let them fly their flag on it. And we will not turn, we have yet to turn someone away that wants to come in there and photograph it or tour it. Just because we want the public to be able to, see what's been boarded up for 38 years, And so that's been fun. And then we lit it up at 9:01 on 901 day last year. We put power to it and lit up all the tiers, and so it lights up every night. So just kind of some ways to bring it back to life.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it also trusts that in the process of playing, people might see something. Not only are you going to make a relationship, but they might actually see something that I wouldn't have seen.
Yeah, myopia helps keep you from being too myopic.
That's great.
Yeah.
I wish
Anything
I had
come
a
to
story
mind?
about somebody jumping off the steeple,
Well,
right? Like,
we're pastors. We're serious, grim folks, We're,
well, I mean, of recent, to be honest, joy or playfulness has been hard to find. We're working through some approvals with city and county right now, right? So lots of meetings, lots of one-on-ones with lawmakers in city and county government. But I think where I've seen joy has been in the faces of some of our elder congregants who we showed the vision to. And we shared with them some of our anchor institutions who are already on board, and them to light up and say, hey, I can't wait, and you better hurry up because I want to be here to see this come to fruition. And so that's the joy that drives me to see people who have given blood, sweat, and tears to our congregation, and they see this new vision that excites them. And they just want to be a part of seeing it come to reality and what it will mean, not just for our congregation, but for the city. So those are the places of joy that I've been clinging to.
I don't want that to be the end, but that's a really nice way to come back around to this question of how are we faithful to an ongoing story in a way that doesn't get us stuck. I mean, to have elders come in, and we've experienced some of that here at Calvary. Honestly, as we've renovated, we had to do some really deep renovations, but to see people who've been here generationally walk in and see the light and see what happens as the building kind of opens in arms, there's nothing that compares to someone with a long, long memory and affection for a place to come in and say, this is different, but it's true to what this place was supposed to be. So thank you for that. And thanks to all three of you for kind of reflecting on some curious questions together. I'm proud of you.